Okay, everybody, so this is my spoiler free review of The Northman, Robert Eggers' newest film that he directs and writes, and co written by Sean. Now, I am an absolute super fan of The Witch, his first film, and that to me was basically a masterpiece. And I really, really loved The Lighthouse, not as much, but I still thought it was a great, great film. So he's become one of my favorite directors. He is in that Ari Aster category for me, where they're just on the rise and they're getting the respect they finally deserve. However, you get a little worried before this film came out because then I see that one of my favorite horror directors is doing now an epic, right? This revenge tale. And it makes you worry a little because you're like, okay, are we going to lose some of that great horror he usually does? Is it going to kind of box him in that it's a revenge tale? And because revenge tales sometimes can get a little eye rolly where it just keeps a lot of grunting and a lot of, hell bent on vengeance and not much thinking to it. So that was always a worry for me from the start. And it's cool that he's getting a bigger budget. It's interesting now it's Focus Features as a studio instead of A24. So it's just this bigger thing all around. But does bigger usually mean better? In my opinion, most of the time, no. A lot of the times that just makes the script suffer. And if we look at it through the career of Robert Eggers, I think that this film, it is obviously looks the best out of any of these films. It has the most action to it. It's brutal. And it's the same cinematographer from both of his films. So similar cinematography that's still amazing. The score stands out the most. And everything in that facet of it is great. And it's really well done in that sense. And if you really like revenge flicks and you like, Game of Thrones, even, it's very Game of Thrones. You feel like at the end of the day with this film that you just watched a solid episode of Game of Thrones. Now, why that's disappointing to me is because he puts horror into this revenge flick, which I like. It's this epic Viking story, right? I like that he's putting in his style still, but you'll see certain critics say, oh, but it didn't affect, him being Robert Eggers. I totally disagree on that because what makes Robert Eggers so great is that his stories are always incredibly smart and you're thinking about the film for a long time after, and they all end on a haunting moment that stays with you. It just gives you that feeling, and you know what I'm talking about if you've seen his previous films. That doesn't happen here. This is actually a movie like most revenge tales. You can shut your brain off, and that's incredibly disappointing for Robert Eggers. And that's where my disappointment with this film comes, is in the story, where it's not this incredibly smart story like his other two films, and you're not going to be thinking about this movie afterwards. You're just going to watch it, say that was a pretty good time, I'm entertained, but it just feels like a really good blockbuster. And I think that that's good, but when we know who's directing it, it's disappointing. So you have to look at it in different ways, where I think so many people are gonna like the film. I really enjoyed the film, and I thought it was a really, really good film. Like, I was entertained the whole time. I wasn't bored. And like I said, production design's off the chart. Score is incredible here. Acting's great, right? You got this A-list cast. But before we get into the acting for a second, I do want to make that point that still, though, that is where you can add all this big stuff in a bigger budget. But again, yes, what the fear was of what I originally had, that he was going to do an epic revenge tale, that it was going to maybe box him in from doing his ultimate high ceiling where he can go places where your brain didn't think it could go from film, and something that sticks with you. And it just doesn't happen here. And guess what? If you're waiting for that classic Robert Eggers, shot to end the movie that, makes you feel like, wow, no. This isn't that movie that people are going to go on Reddit and talk about for days and, have something that's making your brain stimulated. It's just not it. And that's disappointing. And yeah, so that fear that I felt when he signed up for this, there you go. I just don't think it was the best decision for him to do it. Maybe business wise, yes, it's the best decision, but for the art, yeah, no. It's just it seems like he's just having fun making a really good epic revenge tale. And if that's what you're looking for from him, that's great. But for me, it's just disappointing to know what he's actually capable of, and then seeing him kind of doing this. So he's really good at it, though, and it's that feeling that visually everything here feels unique and different. That's where it stands out. But the story beats, right? You've seen before. The message you've seen before. It's a blend of Game of Thrones, The Revenant. It's those type of stories that in a film, you know where it's going from the beginning. There's a twist in it that's okay. It's a twist we've seen before, and then the message has been done to death. So that's where I was just shocked how unoriginal those parts were. And that's the problem. A lot of tales, it could be in any timeline. When it's a revenge story, a lot of times it's so hyper focused on that it doesn't even give a moment to breathe for character, and a lot of side characters are very thin, and that happens here too. And I think the acting's amazing, right? You got this great cast with Alexander Skarsgård, Anya Taylor-Joy, Willem Dafoe, who I wish was in the film more, Bjork, who's in here for 5 minutes. Nicole Kidman was pretty good, but I've seen her do better. And the standout for me was actually Claes Bang, who I wasn't familiar with. He played Dracula recently. He was actually excellent in this film, so I thought he actually put on the best performance. I think if you're a huge Anya Taylor-Joy fan like me, the character's not great here for her. It kind of just feels like not much to her character, and she doesn't really get some great moments here. It's really the Alexander Skarsgård show at the end of the day, and he does an awesome job with it. And I think he was perfectly cast for the part. But again, you get little drizzles of horror, which is awesome that we know from Robert Eggers, but you're going to take away the thinking part of it now. You're removing it for really intense action and gore, which is cool, and I love that stuff too. But it's so hard to review something like this because you know who's behind it, you know what they're capable of, and you know what you're watching, and where it kind of feels limited. So overall, though, I'm gonna give this film an 8.1, and it would be my least favorite of his films, but I still think it's a great movie that you have to see in theaters because it is literally made for that. It's so big and intense, and I just think that you gotta accept I'm going to see Robert Eggers' movie to shut my brain off, which feels weird. And that's why, again, like what's bringing the score up for me is the acting, the music, and the cinematography, which is just on point again, and the action's really good. But what's bringing that down is the script, the unoriginality of the script, and of course, not having it make you think at all, and you don't feel much from this film, and it's ultimately not memorable. So, giving it an 8.1. Let me know if you plan on seeing this film. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I try to respond to as many as I can. Please let me know your thoughts on Robert Eggers' films as a whole. I'd love to hear your thoughts on The Witch, The Lighthouse. And please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss my spoiler review that's going to come out soon for this same film, The Northman. And please follow me at Steve Varley Show on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok for more of me. And I'll see you next time.